My brothers and sisters, may the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus was passing through a field of grain on the Sabbath, his disciples began to make a path while picking the heads of grain. At this the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and he and his companions were hungry? How he went into the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of offering that only the priest could lawfully eat and shared it with his companions?" And then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." The Gospel of the Lord. We just had recounted for us from the book of Samuel the calling of David as the successor to Saul. And even though Saul was very successful with regard to fighting the enemies of Israel, the Lord was not pleased with him because he failed to fulfill and keep the commands of God. And so he's put aside for the sake of another king. And interestingly, when Samuel makes his way to Bethlehem to anoint this particular king, he assumes when he sees many of the sons that this must be surely the one who will become king, just because of the way that they looked. We find that rather than that being the case, that God knows the interior of the heart. He looks at what we are like inside, not what we look like outside. And so David, the youngest one, who also was obviously kind of well-groomed. He said he was ruddy and of handsome appearance, so he was not ugly by any stretch, had the interior heart that God is looking for. And as we know from the story of David, that even he, being chosen, ends up failing sadly in the course of his career. But the big difference with him is that he again tends to seek from God forgiveness and once again goes on to the right path. And then in the gospel today specifically, we're told the story of how the disciples on the Sabbath are doing what the Pharisees see as a wrongful act, that they're literally taking grains and eating them. And it, of course, reminds us in some ways of what we sometimes do. We tend to get so taken up with the little things that we miss the bigger picture and the greater picture. During Lent, for example, it's very traditional for us to give up certain things, and that's a good thing. To give up some candy, perhaps, or some other item that we really like. But if in the giving of those things up, we end up being so ill-willed towards our neighbor and towards the people we work with, it'd be better to eat the candy and be good to them as opposed to giving the candy up. And essentially, that's what Jesus is suggesting today. And it's the little things that are secondary. There's the bigger picture, the greater picture is the one that is the most important.